The International Newsnet World Report is a national television news show available in more than 30 million homes. We broadcast daily real news the networks won't tell you. We are solely viewer-supported. That means you. You can donate at our website, inenworldreport.net. We hope you find the following interview informative and helpful.
Russian President Vladimir Putin dismissed his long-serving prime minister Wednesday and nominated little-known cabinet official Viktor Zubkov to replace him in a surprise move that could put Zubkov in line to be the next Russian president. On the same day, Russia has announced it has exploded the world's biggest non-nuclear bomb in a dramatic escalation of the new Cold War. David Kotz is a professor of economics at the University of Massachusetts-Amherst. He is the co-author with Fred Weir of Russia's Path from Gorbachev to Putin, the Demise of the Soviet System and the New Russia. He now joins us by phone. Welcome, Dr. Kotz.
Glad to be with you, Lenny.
Dr. Kotz, can you tell us what has happened in Russia?
Well, they have a very unusual political system in Russia. It's a presidential system in which virtually all power is concentrated in the office of the presidency. There is a two-term limit, total of 8 years, and what happened the last time around is the previous president named his successor, effectively. Boris Yeltsin, the previous president, in 1999, named a new prime minister, and then named him as his successor. He anointed him, and that was Vladimir Putin, who ended up getting overwhelmingly elected in an election that was not widely viewed as very honest. And Putin is now nearing the end of his 8 years, and assuming he steps down on March 2nd, when the presidential election is scheduled for, there will be a new president, and everyone's been expecting Putin to name a successor, and he's been very coy about it. And so his move is seen in the context of this history, that the not very highly regarded former Prime Minister Mikhail Fradkov was dismissed, and just as Putin was relatively unknown when he was named as the next in line, so this individual, Viktor Zubkov, is someone nobody had heard of. He's a very minor official. He is apparently head of something called the Financial Monitoring Service, which is part of the Finance Ministry, and it is in charge of overseeing money laundering enforcement. So that's going to be the new prime minister.
When Prime Minister Mikhail Fradkov, the prime minister who was just asked to step down, was relieved of his duties, is that really, how does the government function? In some of the articles I've read, it said that Russia's government has now been dissolved. Is this really true, or where does, since you say the power stays with the president, how does this settle the daily operations until a new until a new prime minister comes forward and reorganizes things?
Well, in many countries that have a president and a prime minister, you hear the term the government is dissolved, and when this falls on American ears, it sounds very odd. You'd think that means there's no government, but government has a somewhat different meaning in that kind of system. In that sense, the government is it's the prime minister and those who serve under him. There's the president. There's a very big part of the state, the central state in Russia, consists of the presidency and its apparatus. And there's a big bureaucracy that remains from prime minister to prime minister. And all of that still stays in place and functions. There's just no prime minister and those who serve directly under the prime minister. Things don't grind to a halt. The question is, what is the significance of dismissing one and naming another? And the speculation is that Putin is considering naming Viktor Zubkov as his successor. So who is this Viktor Zubkov? Well, he has a long association with Putin. He worked under Putin when Putin was an official in the city government of St. Petersburg in the early 1990s. And what I find most interesting is that Zubkov is involved in overseeing money laundering. Now, that makes him sound like he's someone in charge of catching crooks, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. Money laundering there is no enforcement of regulations against money laundering in Russia. And while I don't know the details, based on what is known about the way the Russian government functions, someone who is in charge of overseeing money laundering enforcement, it would suggest to the average Russian a kind of a shady position. People buy positions in the Russian government based on the size of the bribes that they can collect. There are going prices for various positions. It's sort of like the medieval Catholic Church when, you'd buy a position. And the parallel is interesting because Putin had moved from St. Petersburg to Moscow initially in the 1990s, and in those days, St. Petersburg was not at the center of things. The power was all centered in Moscow. Putin moved to work in what is called the Kremlin Property Management Agency. And that was considered by many the most corrupt institution in Moscow. It was in charge of managing hundreds of billions of dollars worth of assets that belonged to the Kremlin. And he wasn't the head of it. He was to be the direct assistant to the man who was head of it and was viewed as very corrupt. Now, what is the relevance of this? When you're the president of Russia and you're about to leave office, one of your major fears is that you'll be prosecuted in the future for various ways that you might have feathered your nest and those of your friends. So the best kind of person to have succeed you is someone who has had his fingers in the till somewhere else himself, about whom you retain documentary evidence of his past. It was widely believed that Boris Yeltsin, the previous president, had what the Russians